I said, wait.
No.
Fine.
Starship Troopers is a sci-fi action film that came out in 1997. Underperformed at the box office, especially for its budget. Critically not well received, pretty lambasted. But even a few years after that, began to grow in popularity, and today enjoys a pretty strong cult following.
We're guessing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's everybody else says it has a strong cult following, so, but understandably so. It does, just in perusing YouTube on a daily basis. I do hear it get mentioned, I think, at least once a week, if not more than that. The cast and director have appeared at cons, like up to 20 years after the movie's release. I believe 2017 was the last con that I watched interviews with them from. But yeah, very solid fan base, and does seem to be getting a lot, or is getting a lot more appreciation up to 2017 and even now. And it's been not a favorite of mine, but I've enjoyed watching it multiple times over the years.
I mean, I keep talking you into watching these sci-fi movies. So
yeah, I just realized it's this is seems to be becoming the sci-fi box office dud that now has cult following.
So next, Fifth Element. Okay.
That I'm gonna need some heavy bribing to watch that one. I made it 20 minutes, and not my cup of tea.
It's a hard movie to take. It really is.
It is. Anyway, back to the subject.
Oh yeah, we're reviewing.
So
movie.
yeah, to what extent it has a cult following is negligible. It just has endured. Opinions on it have greatly improved in the, what are we at, 26 years since its release, and for good reason. I mean, when you look at the script on it, it's not particularly great. Overall pretty simplistic. Nothing very profound as far as the script goes. I mean, I feel like this could have been made for a drastically less than the $100 million that it cost. And I mean, the quality of the writing would have been the same. It's about what you'd expect from a B movie. But given a $100 million budget that they somehow got away with spending, the director said, or kind of the reason they were able to do this is while they were making the film, leadership at Sony just changed every few months, so they just kind of kept shooting without a whole lot of oversight.
Keep your head down. They won't notice.
Keep your head down. Just do your thing. Which, it didn't work out for Sony as far as return on investment, at least with the initial box office run. But it, has paid off with mind share in the long run, given the amount of attention that this still gets, whether or not it translates to money. But one of the things I was struck by earliest in it is just how, and not just because I'm slightly biased towards films made in the 90s, but just how freaking well made it is in pretty much every standpoint. So script notwithstanding, there's cleverness, there's consistency. It knows what it is, and it is what it is on 11 throughout the entire runtime. But it is extremely well made. A lot of attention to detail. Good production design, just shockingly good production value, and a film where you can see the money on the screen the entire time.
There was a lot of money.
A lot, yeah.
Because that $100 million that's not adjusted. That is the actual $100 million from 97.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, so two films that year that were made for exorbitant amounts of money. I mean, Titanic released the same year, and that was an unheard of $200 million film. And this is, as I was watching and rewatching Starship Troopers for this video, just wondering how on earth they were able to get greenlit for that amount of money. But yeah, like I said, you see it on the screen. There's frequently movies that I watch nowadays, watch it, and then you look at the budget, and I'm just shocked at how much it cost to make these films. And you look at it, and it's like you can't see where the money is, but in Starship Troopers, you see the money on the screen. There's a vast amount of visual effect shots, a lot of special effect shots, and just going through behind the scenes or crew interviews talking about this. It's just like they made the most of the money they had to make sure, and it's all there on on the screen. The visual effects are the when I initially watched it, I don't even know how many years ago, just absolutely blown away by the quality of the visual effects, especially compared to things nowadays, which, I mean, we've come a long way in, say, processing power. Like they talked about how many hours it would take to render out certain images, and we've made improvements in, say, like textures and detail and that. But I feel like between this or Starship Troopers and Jurassic Park, we haven't really gone past that as far as just overall visual effects integration goes. I mean, you've got scenes with 3,000 of the bugs just swarming across the screen, and just so many shots of the bugs walking, and you look at each individual one, and it's walking differently, it's behaving differently. You can just see what it's doing. It's not just a mindless thing.
I can't even imagine how much work that took. I cannot even, and that's with our current modern technology. So back then, just like trying to render one, it's like, all right, so we have all the settings, everything else. Start, and that will come back to the computer in 3 days.
Yeah. The only shot they give I forget which shot it was, but the only time estimate that I saw on that was like one shot taking about 60 hours to render.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's like interstellar length of time rendering. They had shots on there. I think even just individual frames that would take days to render on Inception. Or no, sorry, not Inception, Interstellar. Jeez. Long day at work.
Well, they're both Christopher Nolan movies. They all run together.
Yeah. But, yeah, and I rewatched this one about 3 times for this podcast, and each time just looking at as much of the screen as I could and watching it in HD on a good TV screen. There is so much attention to detail as the bugs are getting shot and the bullet holes are happening. You can like see bullet holes appear in the bugs, and then the background moving behind it, and just the destructibility of the arachnid shells that they're getting pumped full of hundreds of rounds. Just so much work. And Phil Tippett was the lead VFX guy on that, and that guy is freaking amazing at what he does.
I mean, they even had like someone throwing like bug bits, back at the actors. I mean, they made it about as immersive and fluid as possible, and it just it blows my mind away, man. That just that is some of the best special effects ever in a movie.
It is. It's slightly inconsistent. There's some shots that are obviously not as good as others, like when Denise Richards is trying to pilot the ship away from the arachnid meteorite, and you see the communication tower get taken off. That was not amazing.
No, and there was another one where they're firebombing a bunch of bugs on a desert planet scene, and the last bug, to burn, essentially, it doesn't look terribly convincing. But I mean, all in all, in general, though,
overall, I mean,
dang.
Yeah, you can nitpick a few things. Some of the explosions aren't amazing. I mean, it is mid-90s CG on some of the stuff, but it just makes the rest of it stand out so very, very well. Or even just, one little detail that I noticed when Dizzy arrives at basic training and she challenges Clancy Brown's character Zim, and they have a little bit of a fight, and he pins her to the ground, I believe with either his arm or his knee.
It was a knee.
Knee on the neck, and she's passing out. The next day, you just see the bruise on her neck. It's never mentioned, but great little detail in the world that apparently that even people who had seen it repeatedly didn't pick up on that until multiple viewings. I think it was my second time through recently that I noticed that. But it's just a very, very weird given the craftsmanship of the script, which is not incredible. It like, as far as I'm concerned, had some pretty severe pacing problems. It's over 2 hours long. Sequences get repetitive, and I thought the bulk of the story should have been kicked off with the bug asteroid that hit Buenos Aires, and you have the 10 million death toll, or 12 million and 10 million. That should have happened far earlier in the film. I know they had a lot of stuff to set up. So yeah, from a script standpoint, issues, and then from a acting standpoint, whether or not they're intentionally trying to overact, or I mean, the entire film is kind of shot like a propaganda film, or as Verhoeven referred to it, it's a film that would have been made by the society that it takes place in, which I think is a good way to think about it, but still not. I know it gets often criticized for the performance of the actors, and I think I'm not as hard on that as other people are. I think the performances work for what they are and what they need to accomplish, but by no means great acting. It's serviceable, passable.
But that was purposeful. So I mean, they according to, am I saying this right? Verhoeven.
Paul Verhoeven.
Yeah. So according to that guy, he was looking for very pretty people, that the acting didn't have to be quite on par with how they're looking. Because again, I mean, not only is he trying to do basically a propaganda film, but I mean, he's also filming a movie that's talking about making propaganda. It all goes into this very gutsy move of getting very pretty people that can kind of act. Sort of.
Kind of.
But that helps continue on the whole feel of the film.
Yeah.
And Denise Richards, because, I'm French and I will point that out. Beyond that, though, like Neil Patrick Harris, Casper Van Dien, Denise Richards, and a number of very, actually, talented side characters.
The I don't know if you call them or not cameos, but the more well-known actors like Michael Ironside, Clancy Brown. I'm not sure so much of his status in the 90s. I knew he was all over the place in the 90s. He had a tremendous amount of films. Michael Ironside has been in a bunch of things, and then name escapes me, but the brother-in-law from Breaking Bad had a few scenes in this one, so you had names as supporting actors, and they went for it, and I think nailed their parts far better than any of the leads did. But yeah, Clancy Brown as Zim, I think, is and Michael Ironside as well. Both those just perfectly typecast, perfectly deliver their roles, and are exactly what they need to be, and are a good bit more memorable to me than I think any of the leads in any of the scenes.
Which one was I can't remember his name, but the guy who plays basically Casper Van Dien's best friend through most of the movie, white hair, Gary Busey's kid.
Gary Busey, Jack Busey.
I think it's Jack Busey.
References,
yeah. I thought he actually did a pretty good job in that. I've only seen him in like that movie and that one Arrival. He played a little 10-second bad guy in that. Yeah. But otherwise, you never see that guy in much of anything.
I haven't seen him in much. I mean, he was solid in this, and actually learned the violin to play Dixie in the scene where they're celebrating, and I believe he's playing the violin in
that's committing to the
one
part.
of the bunker scenes. But yeah, he was solid, and just exactly what he needed to be. But yeah, I can't really remember, other than, I mean, it's been well over a decade, probably almost 20 years since I've seen Arrival. Don't remember it that well, but yeah, well cast all around. I mean, for better or worse, and regardless of the quality of the performances, they all fit their roles pretty darn well.
And yeah, now I wasn't allowed to watch this when it came out. I was still a teenager, and coming from a very strict family. But yeah. So I was probably around 16 when this thing came out.
Yeah, I think it wasn't much on my radar. I think I was in my early 20s when I watched it. I was watching hundreds of movies a year at that time, and I'm not a huge sci-fi nerd, so it wasn't like at the top of my list of things to watch. But
well, I am.
But yeah, it is. Like, I forget if we mentioned this in the Demolition Man one, but this is definitely a film from, say, like the 70s, 80s, 90s that kids would buy a ticket for, and then, or kids would buy a ticket for a different, like, family-friendly film and then sneak in to see this one. I know I think it was one of the commentaries, Casper Van Dien mentions, like, giving out copies of the books to kids and encouraging them to go buy a ticket for The Little Mermaid 2 and then sneak in to see this one. So yeah, definitely one that back when that was a thing that kids would have bought or like tried to sneak into, or had a sibling or older sibling or friend sneak them into, or buy a different ticket and then sneak into, which I feel like doesn't happen all that much anymore. There's far too much access to far more than you'd see in a theater that they just carry around with them in their pockets. But yeah, interesting bit of nostalgia, like sneaking out to see an R-rated film in the theater without your parents, or I feel like that doesn't happen much, if at all, anymore. I mean, who's to say? But yeah, that was definitely a thing for this film. Even part of as I understand it, part of the promotion for the film was encouraging kids to buy a ticket for a different film, then sneak out to see this one.
Now, I have to point this out while we're still talking about the actors and actresses.
Yeah.
They're old. They are so freaking old. And I absolutely love, like, one of the opening scenes where it shows the main character and he's doodling on this thing that looks like paint by numbers. Like, it's not meant for anyone past the age of 7. And he's trying his best to make it look like he's just completely into this thing. And then he sends it over to Denise Richards' character.
Like a high school crush doodle. Does it state if they're actually in high school or college? Because I've heard, I don't think it does. It doesn't in film, but
it's not college, because the dad is busy trying to get him to go to college in a couple of
scenes. So it actually is, because I heard people involved with it were like refer to it as, or other people refer to it as college, but it seemed like high school.
It was definitely high school.
So yeah, you've got actors anywhere from 26 to 29 playing high school.
I think one's in their 30s even.
We were looking up ages, and it's like 26, 27, 29, 29.
Yeah.
Yep. High schoolers and prom and crushes and love triangles and quadrangles and all the... I mean, but that is interesting angle of the script that I find really cool. I haven't read the book it's based on, but I think it's cool and interesting that they basically set a high school drama or like high school romance film in a war setting in this futuristic militarized state. They check the boxes of like teen romance / drama and then shove them into a war. That's a pretty clever contrast.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good touch, barring the actors that were more than a decade too old for their roles.
Yeah. I want to think, too, that this movie is playing a bit of a trick on their audiences, or at least the audience kind of gets punked at one point, just because ever since from the start of it, and then throughout even in the middle, they're talking about how psychic powers are a thing, which is completely... doesn't seem like any other part of this universe to have this little psychic element. And it's all for just the very last scene where they capture this giant brain bug, which just looks like Dunzit or something. They drag it outside, and Neil Patrick Harris goes up to it and he yells out, "It's afraid!" And like, oh my gosh,
it's
really?
Afraid.
That's it.
That's the one that's probably the one element that you could have immediately lost, and I don't think it would have been missing so much from the script. Its inclusion didn't really make any sense to me, and there's a couple of scenes early on dedicated to it. You have Neil Patrick Harris and Casper doing the try to guess the card, and then Casper orders the ferret to go bug his mom. But it's given a fair amount of screen time.
And there was a couple of TV ads too in the middle of the movie that was advertising it.
If I ever remember somebody's name, I'm going to be shocked. But he had a very young Carlton Lassiter from Psych as like, I do think you're psychic? Well, you might be. And just a 10-second little clip out of nowhere. So I mean, that's kind of hilarious that he appears in an ad for being, "Are you a psychic?" and then is later in a show called Psych where he's completely anti any sort of psychic anything.
Now I gotta mention
small trivia.
Yeah, I'll just be quiet then. No, what was it? Oh, the special effect shots. Where some of those were fantastic too. So it wasn't just the CG. There's the one where he's doing the high school dissecting the frog, except it's a big giant bug, and he's pulling out all these gross organs, and they look just awesome. And he's busy throwing them to his girlfriend, and she gets grossed out. She runs out.
Vomits up mashed up banana right onto the specimen.
Was that a mashed up banana?
It was.
Excellent.
Which is definitely not a reference to a Wiggles song, because I have no idea about any of that.
No, I don't. But there was a lot of gore in this movie. I mean, it was almost an NC-17, but probably more for the some of the interpersonal relationship stuff. I think that Verhoeven was trying to push into it. But even then, still, there's this thing where they had this co-ed shower thing, and that's a lot for back for 97. That scene. That was. I mean, as far as I don't know. I mean, this would be mainstream back then. The 90s, there was a lot of erotic thrillers at the time, and Verhoeven had done Basic Instinct and Showgirls as well. So it wasn't anything new for him. But yeah, in this sort of movie, just sort of that candidly, it was very surprising, and I know it was off-putting, or at least suspect or viewed as exploitative or gratuitous around the time it came out. And I think even still, but as the actors and everyone involved said, it just made sense for the world. It was a completely co-ed world, so there wasn't any, I mean, it just very candid and out in the open and wasn't a thing. So yeah, just a detail about the society described by Verhoeven as a fascist utopia, and is interesting. You don't see a lot of say completely co-ed, not genderless, because I mean there's the aforementioned romance and drama there, but yeah, it is an interesting touch and something you don't see in a lot of movies. Just a future where sex really, there's no differentiation there, and that's a big theme, and we could perhaps use this as a transition to the next talking point, which is like Verhoeven's sensibility and a little bit about his history. But yeah, he views, apart from like biological reproductive differences, doesn't really view men and women as anything different, just thinks they're in capabilities completely the same. There's no difference other than some biological ones. That's shown here. Also a thing in RoboCop, definitely Basic Instinct and Total Recall as well, to a slightly hilarious degree there with I don't know if there's any way, I mean, like, all of that aside, it's just a really difficult sell to put Sharon Stone going mano a mano with Schwarzenegger and holding her own. That's tough to do, believably. Yeah. I actually wasn't the biggest fan of that movie. to be honest.
Yeah.
A lot of people are, but it wasn't really quite for me.
Yeah. That one didn't work. I do need to rewatch it, and I will not bother again with the remake to that, which Verhoeven is very much not a fan of, to put it mildly. But yeah, didn't really vibe with Total Recall. But so yeah, a little about Verhoeven, which is very relevant to Starship Troopers. Yeah, so he's from Holland, is a Dutch filmmaker, and actually grew up, well not grew up, but was a kid in World War II. So his experience, he refers to the Starship Troopers world as a fascist utopia. And he does actually have experience with like living in occupied Holland during the war and seeing the violence that was done and seeing the propaganda of the time. And I believe it was an interview referenced like being a kid and sitting with his family at the dining room table. Food was scarce, so they were just eating tulip bulbs because that's some of the only food that they could get. And then a bomb lands across the street and blows out the window, pouring glass all over the dining room table. And saw just in his youth, as he was a pretty darn young kid, just seeing corpses in the street and seeing the reality of what war is, and seeing part of his city destroyed by the British because somebody read a map the wrong way and ended up bombing his city in Holland. So he first got into filmmaking while he was in the Dutch Navy, and the first actual film he made was an actual propaganda film for the Dutch Navy, but a 20-minute documentary / propaganda film. So this kind of thing is very essential to who he is as a person and his artistic vision, at least for his American films. I haven't seen any of his Dutch or European films, just the ones he made in America. And then so he has actual real life experience with fascism, and it makes sense that he would deal with that in this film, as well as take the it's like the actual bits of propagandistic news within the film, and then make this film or like I mentioned before, a film that would be made by the society that it takes place in, which is like, I believe it was Goebbels. I'm never quite sure how to pronounce that guy's name. Or even like the short film that's a part of Inglourious Bastards, the Nation's Pride short film. Just that sensibility bleeds into the acting, just very hyper nationalistic, energetic, enthusiastic, not particularly nuanced or great, but just fitting the tone of the film. So yeah, it does have experience with an actual fascist regime. And then even how he came to make movies in America. He was getting in Holland, getting very frustrated trying to get funding for the films that he wanted to make, because that country was leaning very, very left, and those with the money who could fund films were selective with what they could do, and were essentially becoming not necessarily propagandistic, but were films had to be intellectually stimulating, and this and that, and the rules for what could and could not be made were getting stricter and stricter. And at least according to him, the politics of Holland at the time were leaning like fascistic left. He does use the word fascist quite liberally, in my opinion, and not necessarily accurately, as we'll get to in a second. But it was his wife that pushed him to move to America in '85, because he kind of couldn't do what he wanted to do in Holland given the limitations of funding, and then quickly made RoboCop, Total Recall, Basic Instinct. I forget the exact sequence that happened. So
that's an impressive list, though.
It is. So, I mean, yeah, late '80s and '90s. So just RoboCop, Basic Instinct, Total Recall. Won't go into Showgirls, but Showgirls, Starship Troopers, and then up to 2000 with Hollow Man, with Kevin Bacon. So that's, I mean, at least two of his films that have gotten Oscar nominations for best visual effects. And I mean, we were praising the visual effects before, and if you couldn't tell, we're getting close to the 4th of July here, and neighbors have purchased fireworks.
Yay!
Already, so the lack of sound treatment becoming obvious. But yeah, so on the visual effects, as far as I'm concerned, this film should have taken not the Oscar is the end all, but this should have taken the visual effects Oscar over Titanic, in my opinion. I've rewatched Titanic recently, and it's excellent, and there's some incredible visual effects sequences in that, but I think this takes the cake.
It really does. I mean,
it's superb. I mean, because the visual effects on Titanic are good, but some of them don't age so well. Some of the larger or wider shots of the ship on the water just really did not age well. And there's I mean, obviously really good work in the disaster sequence, but I think for just holding up to now, the Starship Troopers should have gotten the Oscar for that. It is so impressive what they were able to achieve.
I think people were so lost and confused by some of the other aspects of the movie that they kind of just started to ignore just what was beautiful right in front of them. I remember everyone talking about how it just wasn't necessary to have those advertisements throughout the movie, those propaganda, one shots. And for people that aren't understanding where Verhoeven was going with anything, I can see why they would think that.
Yeah, that was a comment they did receive. I mean, like in test screenings, that just immediately cutting to what was not video, but news segments without a transition. And it escapes my mind at the moment what he said about that. But yeah, that was a deliberate decision just to sort of keep the propaganda that was on TV constantly and just a part of people's lives. It was just seamlessly integrated into the film. So I mean, I didn't find that off-putting. I thought it actually worked quite well for what he was going for.
Yeah, and how a lot of the side characters in this movie are mutilated in some way from their term of service, and even just how some of them, how they looked was even impressive. Not counting exploding bugs and all these other things. Special effects, visual effects, all that top marks for this movie.
Or hiring actual amputees for some of the people missing limbs, and they're like it's seen with the recruiters, like the service made me the man I am today, or the infantry made me the man I am today. That was an actual guy missing his legs and I believe arm as well, or at least legs, if not arm, as well. But yeah, to wrap up talking about the director, pretty divisive career he's had, especially in the 90s. Very controversial releases, or just not debated per se. Starship Troopers is probably the most debated one, but yeah, very controversial and divisive director, but very distinct. I mean, I feel like you're watching a Paul Verhoeven film, and you can just see in interviews his personality and his energy level. You can see exactly why his films are the way they are. They very much reflect his personality, who he is as a person and as a creator. So yeah, very distinct voice, very distinct style, for better or worse, and to whatever degree you like what he does, or if you could objectively say what he does is good or not. He's at least has his vision and sticks to his vision as best he can, which I really appreciate.
I'm a little bit torn because I can't help but think he maybe had a grandson or a kid or someone that was playing StarCraft, because that game has 3 alien races, and one is human and one is the Zerg, and I'm sorry, it's the same thing. He just pulled it right out of that stinking video game. Which was more of a draw than later on.
Possible.
There were so many of us nerds that just wanted to go see StarCraft the movie. So, That was a little bit weird for me. I'm surprised there wasn't more talk about that or anything else because it seems so obvious to me.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. I'm not a StarCraft player myself.
And we're done now.
But I'll take his word for that because I have no personal experience. But yeah.
Yeah, but I always thought that was very amusing. But this movie has a lot of draws. It has a ton of staying power. I was able to rewatch this sucker, and I've seen it through the years a number of times, and I still enjoy rewatching this thing. I can't do it again at this point.
Yeah, didn't really have to. Not as much. Yeah, Sunshine was, I think, of the ones we've done so far, just the easiest to watch and rewatch.
Absolutely.
This one, like third time through, is definitely losing it. But I mean, watching it 3 times in less than 2 weeks, I rarely ever do that with a film. It's unless I'm doing a breakdown or a review of it. But I understand why it has staying power, why it has the cult status that it allegedly has. Yeah, not a lot of films like it. So yeah, segueing from Verhoeven to the satire element of it. I don't know if there's much to be said on that, but yeah, just like who Verhoeven is as a creative, just personality wise, this type of satire really fits within his milieu. And satire itself is an interesting subject, and there's debate about its validity. And these are, I mean, as far as my history with the subject, I've dabbled in like satire short stories that have never made it anywhere. But as I was collaborating creatively with other people, be it on like short films or scripts or short stories, or even just in discussions with other writers just on the subject of satire, growing up somewhat conservative and being around conservative people, the concern that people have with that is the unintentional promotion of what you're trying to satirize, which I think is completely malarkey, to use a harsh term, just absolutely bogus and not really even worthy of consideration. Although that does still apparently seem to be a big concern, is because I mean, if you want to make a point, there's different ways to go about that. I prefer the indirect way where you just take an aspect of something and stretch it to a caricature of what it is, drawing attention to what you're trying to draw attention to, like the militarism, the nationalism, the pro becoming a citizen, not a civilian, the distinction there. Like with this, I don't get how it's possible to, say, misunderstand the intent of Starship Troopers, because it's
punching you right in the face.
Yeah, it's
not subtle.
No, it's not even remotely subtle. Even if it was like half the intensity that it is, it would still be very obvious. This is a satire. This is not pro-war whatsoever. It's not pro-fascism, even though I guess by technical definition, slight side note, then back to the point, it does not qualify as, this isn't a fascist utopia. It is a
imperialistic,
very, it fits everything. It fits a number of the criteria, but doesn't actually. And though I don't per se agree with it completely, Sargon of Akkad has a really solid video he put out about 4 years ago talking about the politics and fascism, or whether this is a fascist society or not. He did, I think, a pretty solid job of at least discussing the subjects. About an hour and 20-ish minute video that was very, very well done and structured and researched. But yeah, it doesn't technically fit all the criteria of a fascist society, in that there isn't a single unquestioned leader, a single, like the Nazi regime had Hitler as the, you don't question anything. You just accept what the leader says. And in this film, you have leaders making decisions, admitting they made mistakes, stepping down, owning their failures, talking about even you've got the one character who's like, frankly, I find the concept of a bug that can think offensive, and other leaders saying, if to fight the bug, we have to understand the bug, and that any sort of attribution of intelligence or capability to the enemy is anathema in an actual fascist society. Or the fact that civilians can decide to become citizens. There's freedom, and even in the the TV clips that happen, it's like they're not lying to the public. They show the failed assault. They show the potentially tens of millions dead in Earth. The attack on Buenos Aires is true, because you can see Johnny Rico talking to his parents as it happens. You don't actually see it happen, but it's enough to see that that's actually a thing that's happening. So there isn't as far as can be told within the context of the movie, leaders lying to the public, covering up defeats or spinning defeats as, well, this is actually why it was a triumph of our great society. So there's a acknowledgement of things that were done wrong that just does not happen in actual fascistic society. So it doesn't technically fit the definition of a fascist utopia. Now, whether or not it's a good society or, say, an actual utopia or a pseudo-utopia, that's a completely different discussion, but does not technically fit the definition of fascist.
Right, and they had like some of the propaganda ads throughout it. It wasn't even about what was happening up in space too. They had the one where the guy was captured and his execution would be that night. And if you want to, view this, go to channel whatever,
Would you like to know more?
Which sounds horrifying, and it sounded so alien to people like back then. Now when I'm like sitting there watching, going, yeah, I could probably see that happening at some point, or horribly.
Yeah, the administrative punishment of Johnny Rico getting whipped, or just very candid handling of, somebody's going to get executed live on TV. That's the thing that we can watch.
When the one kid gets his head literally blown off because he handed his helmet to Rico, and all Rico can do when it happens is scream out medic. There's no head on top of the guy. I'm sorry, that was a great scene. And then the other one I loved. I gotta tell you, my favorite actor/actress of this movie, it's the mom during one of the ads when there's bugs on the ground and the kids are stomping, and she's laughing hysterically, like clapping her hands. Total villain. It was like she committed to that thing. I love that. It's cheesy and pointless and irrelevant to anything that we're talking about now, but it was great.
Yep.
Yeah.
Laugh hysterically as the kids stomp on cockroaches.
And apparently that was a trick that was used in the original Mortal Kombat movie when they captured or they're fighting the lizard, which was this really roughly done CG creature. When it dies, then the final move, the character kicks it and bugs fall out, and then he smashes the bugs as he's doing a really weird battle cry. But they had to do bugs because otherwise it would have taken the movie too far violent. They weren't allowed to show blood in that scene, so it was bugs.
So that was was it 95 Mortal Kombat film?
The OG.
Paul W.S. Anderson.
Mm-hmm. Oh wait, that was him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he brought us Resident Evil.
Yep.
Wow.
Via Event Horizon.
Oh yeah, Event Horizon is had nightmares for 15 years after I watched that movie.
That's a movie.
That's a movie.
Hey, more underperforming 90s sci-fi we could talk about.
It had a great cast and everything else, and they did that horrible thing where they explain how ships go faster in light by taking out the piece of paper, drawing a line. It's like, how do you go faster than doing a straight line? And then they fold a piece of paper and they stick the pencil through it. What? I mean, and that's been done in movies 10 times, I swear.
Dimension of Pure Evil. Very well made film. Another horrifically expensive film that's
movie right now.
Anyway, back to So rabbit trailed or I got distracted by talking about fascism and forgot the original point I was trying to make. But
what was the point you were trying to make?
I don't remember actually. On the subject of Verhoeven and politics and that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know that there's all that much more to say about like the politics of the film, and I don't know if we want to talk all that much about that, given how divisive things can be. But satire. That is the validity of satire. So yeah, I don't understand how someone could watch this film and not get the satire of it, even without. I think the shot that sells it most glaringly, obviously, even though most of the rest of it is glaringly obvious, is the service made me the man I am today. And then Johnny Rico looks at the multiple missing limbs. So I mean, if that doesn't tell you what's going on, I don't really can't really help you beyond that.
And that was the whole, the horrors of war. The whole movie is going into all this propaganda and everything, but it was much more subtle, talking about like, yeah, but war's bad. It is. It's bad. And so they had, like they're passing out the rifles to the kids, letting them play with the bullets and stuff, and like you're just going, ugh, cringe. But you lose track of right and wrong in the middle of war, and it becomes a matter of survival. And I think they were demonstrating that. I think pretty well.
Yeah, with Sean Patrick Harris. Neil Patrick Harris. Good grief. Yeah, like with the progression of his character, you have him. He's you get little hints of his character, like in his first scene where he points out Johnny Rico's bad math score. You have a little hint of who he is there, but you have the Rico, him, and Denise Richards' character Carmen. They are promised to be friends forever, essentially. And then towards the end, Neil Patrick Harris talks about, every day I have to make decisions that send hundreds of people to their deaths. You just see him come just very by the numbers, which is kind of how D-Day was handled, as I understand it. Just they calculated, all right, what percentage of people need to live in order for us to accomplish our goal? And it was a small percentage relative to the amount of men that they sent over. And the people making the decisions knew that. I don't believe the soldiers getting out of the boats and just getting mown down by machine gun fire knew that. But I mean, those are the kind of decisions that are made in war. Or to paraphrase a line in Game of Thrones, it's just like war. Generally, the army with the most soldiers wins. Wow.
Barring maybe like 300 or some sort of like epic planning and maneuver.
Out of the ordinary or extenuating circumstance. Yeah, it
literally
is.
It's a matter of numbers. It usually is.
Throw soldiers at each other, and the one with the more generally wins. So,
or better tech. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are, or whoever has the nukes.
Yeah.
Or more nukes. But yeah, you have to make decisions like the assault on Clendathu, like well over 300,000 casualties, and then when they head back, Neil Patrick Harris's character, I don't know why I can't remember his name in the film, but just he knew that was most likely going to fail and nobody was going to survive, but wanted to get the brain bug and made that decision. And I like I forget who the original quote is from, but the Verhoeven referenced it a couple of times. It was, war makes fascists of us all. So regardless of the use of the word fascist, the principle there is, war is not this really patriotic, glamorous, pretty people running off to, I'm taking responsibility, I'm going to become a citizen, it's my choice, and then they just get mown down and ripped apart by the bugs and die by the hundreds of thousands. So yeah, very clear, crystal, inescapably clear satire in this film. That propaganda films, you want to get people, war needs soldiers, and if you show the realities of war, you're probably less likely to get the soldiers. Or even some of the cast and director were talking about recruiting is like you need to convince the soldier that they will survive And when, I mean, in fact, most, if not all of them will die, or at least many of them will die. But you need to convince the soldier that they'll be the hero, they'll survive, essentially. Otherwise, if they all knew they would die, that would be less likely. And then there are people who, whether they live or die, they want to fight for their beliefs or whatever. But yeah, I personally greatly enjoy satire, and I think this is a very effective, perhaps not brilliant, but very effective, clear satire of the sheen of like hyper patriotism, hyper militarism, and become a citizen. They sell the patriotism of it, or the not glamour, but they sell it well, and then
nationalistic pride.
Nationalistic, yeah. There you go. Well, I was just saying words to try to give myself time to say other words, and then you like see when they get to the when Michael Ironside leads them to the camp, or the one camp where they just get mobbed by thousands of the bugs. They get there and you just see the corpses everywhere. They had, I forget how many corpses total that they made, but even like the footage you see, there's a dog that got crushed. It does not shy away from just how brutal and hideous war is.
They're talking about they call them the bug meteorites, but the things that the bugs are tossing at Earth to attack.
They hurl their spore into space.
Yeah, and I have to give them some credit. The scene, and it looks like an epic firestorm, where that meteorite came down, and, it's where it killed Rico's parents and everything.
Yeah.
A million people died, but just fire everywhere, massive destruction. That was an interesting way of showing it versus your typical, here's a ruined building with, rubble on the ground. So he did a different thing with it. Now, I gotta say, it drove me a little bit nuts because they're showing the entire Milky Way. The entire Milky Way, and I don't even know
right at the beginning
and I don't know the actual estimated length of the Milky Way, but I gotta tell you, it's really far. And if a planet, and they're pointing at directly the opposite side of everything, showing that this is where the bug planet is, so they're somehow able to fire these little tiny meteorites at multiples of the speed of light, have it go through the center of the galaxy, which is supposed to be a black hole, everyone says, but somehow, and yet aim and have it hit Earth on the other side.
Not only Earth, but
like specific
a city on Earth.
I mean, my gosh, like even like 16-year-old me or whatever was just like, huh?
I don't even know how many light years across the galaxy is, but yeah, the graphic they show on that is just like, no.
I mean, they could have fixed it. They could have had it like, they were floating in on a nomad planet. It's just outside of our solar system, or maybe they've set up on Mars, or there could have been a lot of other things other than, no, we're going to fling a rock 50 trillion miles an hour. Perfectly.
And then when the ship, or Denise Richards' Carmen, reroutes the ship to a more optimal course, and then you see the speed that the asteroids
it's just
traveling.
Like
what's that, like a couple of miles an hour, maybe?
Yeah, and so
or maybe a few, or even if it was thousands of miles an hour. I mean, you're looking at what, millennia, if not tens of thousands of. Not a science nerd, if you couldn't tell. But.
No, and now that you mention it too, though, like, why weren't they traveling at the speed of light? Because that was like supposed to be like right in the middle of their trip, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nah, let's just go old school style. We'll get there in
if you want
100 years.
Consistency or coherence of any sort when it comes to science in this film.
I know I am harping on a B movie, science fiction movie, so I should go easy with that.
You got to point that one out. That's even a lot for this film.
It was. I mean, for the most part, though, they don't go into anything too deeply because it wasn't necessary.
No, you didn't need a physics lecture. I mean, it's just at the beginning of the film, you have the news segments, the establishment of the world, of the bugs, and then it cuts to the classroom where Michael Ironside is talking. You have the love triangle set up, the difference between a citizen and a civilian. So yeah, I mean, it sets up the world quickly and effectively as long as you just blank out on a few details to keep from driving your brain crazy with lack of continuity.
Well, Michael Ironside, so he goes into actually quite a bit of narration isn't the right word, but
exposition.
Exposition, thank you. Early on, and he's going into stuff like the use of violence and a lot of other stuff that no teacher would ever be talking about in any high school.
No,
at least not
nowadays.
Not right now.
Not. But apparently, in that fascistic utopia, though, talk about the supreme virtue of violence.
Violence in school, it's the right thing to do. Okay.
Yeah.
But other than that, like all together, what would you give this movie out of 10?
Oh, that's tough to do.
And give yourself a little bit of extra oomph, just considering we've seen this movie so many times now that it,
Yeah, I think I'm going to land on a 7. A 6 is probably more accurate to how I feel, but that doesn't seem right. Something seems off. So I'm gonna give it a 7.
I'll go with a 7.
Yeah, B movie script. Clever, creative, but solidly B movie. But everything else, the craftsmanship, the production value, you see every penny on screen. Mm-hmm. The things it gets right, everyone's just huge enthusiasm for what they're doing.
That was consistent through the movie. Yeah, he did a good
so
job with
much
that.
Energy. Mm-hmm. Even I mean the guy's not young, but you watch interviews with him even pretty recently. Just that guy's got an extraordinary amount of energy that I haven't had since I was 12, and he's more than twice my age.
I've never had it, so it's okay.
Yeah, give it a 7. It's a decent film. It deserves its alleged cult status, and it's not one I'm going to avoid in the future.
No, I bless the movie for its attributes. It's nothing. It's not breaking theater in any way, but for the points it was trying to make, pretty good flick.
Yeah. I'd say so, and I don't think there's anything else we can say without being
repetitive,
redundant, or
boring,
trivial.
Yeah.
So wrap it there, and
scene.
And scene.